Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing signs that you're their backup option. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast, and today we are discussing signs that you're their backup option. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you need to make sure you become your ex's first choice again. In today's podcast, I'll be discussing 3 signs that actually you're their backup option. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is inconsistent communication. So when I say inconsistent communication, I'm looking at a couple of important points that you need to recognise. Firstly, we're looking at the fact that your ex-dumper has reached out to you, because it's important for me to reiterate that in my belief, in most instances, if you have been dumped, you should never contact your ex again unless they contact you first. So we're not talking about in this regard if you as a dumpee reach out to your ex and therefore they might respond somewhat briefly and then maybe you text them again and they don't reply anymore at all. That is not the inconsistent communication I'm referring to, because if that is the case, then we're not looking at your ex viewing you as a backup option. We're looking at your ex as just not really wanting to be with you in any way, shape or form at all at this moment. You know, they've dumped you. Unfortunately, they did this because they lost romantic emotional attraction, and unless they regrow that attraction, they're not going to want to communicate in all likelihood. And maybe if you do reach out, they might respond to try to be polite, or maybe because they're worried about you. But perhaps if you then send another message, they think, no, I don't want to reply. You know, I've told my ex it's over. And therefore, this could be deemed as inconsistent, but it's not what we're looking for today. Because if you, as a dumpee, are chasing your ex, and they are inconsistent from that point, I would suggest it's more about them not, at this time, wanting to be connected with you. It doesn't mean you can't get your ex back in the future, although nothing is guaranteed, of course, but it just shows that right now, they're not interested in being connected with you. So this isn't what we're looking at today. We're looking at when your ex-dumper reaches out to you. Okay, so if you as a dumpee receive communication from your ex, by and large, that's a good sign. But if this communication is inconsistent, it could be a sign that they want you as their backup option. Now, there is something else to consider, a second sub-point to point number 1, and that is, even if you navigate it correctly. So, if your ex-dumper reaches out to you, and you don't navigate the communication stage effectively, then they are likely to be inconsistent with this communication. Okay, because if you're not doing your part, then they are probably going to be confused. They're probably going to be thinking, does my dumpee even want me back in their life? Maybe they don't. I've already hurt them. Probably I should back off now. And therefore, the inconsistency could be seen from that perspective as well. So just to reiterate, when we're looking at the first sign that you are your ex-dumper's backup option, we're talking about inconsistent communication, even if you navigate it correctly. So, your ex-dumper reaches out to you, which is by and large a good sign. You navigate this communication effectively and correctly as best to your ability, but even with these 2 elements in place, your ex-dumper is still inconsistent. So even though they've reached out to you, even though you've communicated effectively, they are now being very hot and cold. They are being somebody who seems interested one moment, then vanishes again for a while, then comes back, then maybe the communication is very periodic. You see what I'm saying here? The inconsistent communication from a dumper to a dumpee, if they reach out first, if you react in a positive, effective way, and they're still inconsistent, this is a sign that they want you as their backup option. This is a sign that they want you as their safety net. This showcases, in all likelihood, that they're not fully invested in you, they're not fully invested in reconnecting with you, but they want you within their life, within some range. Now, maybe this is some type of platonic friend, maybe they're trying to friend zone you, but generally speaking, somebody who wants to friend zone their ex will actually be quite consistent because they want you as a platonic friend. They want an active platonic friendship with you. So that's not always the sign of inconsistent communication. More so, that is a sign that they want you as their safety net, as their backup option, basically keeping you in play if whatever they're trying to do within their life right now doesn't work out. Maybe they're dating somebody new. Maybe they want to try dating somebody new. Maybe they just want to keep you within their orbit. They just want to stay within your orbit, so you're kind of in and around each other's life, but not too close because they don't want you back at this time. But they're thinking, well, if I'm single within a few months, maybe I'll try and get my ex back. It won't be too hard because I know they're really into me. I know that when I ended the relationship, they were somewhat desperate for me, and therefore I know I can just come back to them whenever I want. As a dumpee, you don't want your ex-dumper feeling so convinced that they can have you whenever they want you. Now, that doesn't mean you should be rude to them if they reach out. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. I suggest that you communicate in an effective, positive way to navigate the communication stage effectively. And if you do this and they're still inconsistent, then that is when you might want to be backing off yourself. Okay, so it's very important you understand what I'm saying here, because I don't want you ignoring your ex. I don't want you saying things to your ex which are going to make things worse. But it's one of those scenarios where you're almost giving them a chance from that initial communication, but if it's not moving in the direction you're happy with, then you need to withdraw from the scenario completely, because you don't want to be a backup option, you don't want to be friend zoned. But that will be for a somewhat other type of podcast I'll do in the future, because right now we're just looking at those initial signs that you are probably going to be your ex-dumper's backup option. And this is one of the biggest signs that they're giving you inconsistent communication when there's no reason for. Ultimately, you should be viewing this as a good opportunity to get your ex back, but instead of that happening, they're very hot and cold, they're very inconsistent. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast. Please like this video if you're watching on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. And point number 2 is lack of commitment to plans. So again, when we're looking at signs that you are your ex-dumper's backup option, we need to be looking at what they're saying in comparison to what they're doing and trying to really compare and contrast. Does this marry up? Does this seem to be how I feel it? So for instance, if they're reaching out to you and it feels kind of good, it's flowing, and they agree to meet up with you, this is a wonderful moment. This is moving from a communication stage to the meeting stage. But what happens if when you're trying to arrange this meet, it never really gets arranged? What happens if your ex-dumper is not really committing to plans? Or maybe they do initially and then they pull out. Maybe they do it first, but then they cancel. Lack of commitment to plans is unfortunately a sign that you might be viewed as a backup option by your ex-dumper. Now, does this mean this is the case every single time this happens? No, you might not be deemed as a backup option. There might be a legitimate reason. So you have to use your common sense. You have to really consider the possibility of why your ex-dumper isn't really firming up plans, why they are cancelling on you. Is this for a legitimate reason? You can only make that decision if and when you hear what they are saying. But bear in mind, if this happens consistently, similar to when I said in point number 1, if they are inconsistent with their communication, if they are very inconsistent with trying to cement plans, then this unfortunately is a sign that you might be their backup option. But you might be somebody that they have plans with, but then as soon as they get a quote-unquote better offer, they cancel you. Or maybe even worse, they just leave you hanging. Maybe they don't even let you know and they just don't show up. That would be obviously even worse. Or maybe you discuss about meeting and then it just fades away into nothing. That is why, again, I say you need to navigate the communication stage effectively so you can try and mitigate this potential problem arising. You can't always do so, especially if you have plans in place and they just cancel on you. What can you do there? This is them, it's not you. But if you are not communicating effectively, then this could be a challenge initially for you anyway. But a lack of commitment to plans, sadly, does showcase they are not invested enough in you. If they wanted to be back in a relationship with you, they would do everything they can to try and meet up with you. Maybe there's a legitimate reason, but sadly, if it happens more than once, the likelihood is that isn't the case. And there's more going on, unfortunately, likely within their mindset and in their background. Now, if you would like advice and support about how to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, maybe you want help moving through the communication stage, for instance, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Go to my website, www.dateme.tips, for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast about signs that you're their backup option. And point number 3 is no future plans. Now, no future plans for point number 3 is different to point number 2. Let me explain why. So point number 2 is lack of commitment to plans. Point number 2 is all about not really putting those plans in concrete, not really turning up to the plans that you do make. When I'm talking about point number 3, we're talking about no future plans. So this means that you might meet up. This means that you might be meeting up on a somewhat regular basis and everything seems absolutely wonderful. But when you talk about the future, everything goes cold. So for instance, your ex-dumper reaches out to you. You communicate. It goes well. You arrange to meet in a few days' time. You meet. It goes well. You arrange to meet the next week. It goes well. You think we're on track to getting back together. Everything seems brilliant. At that stage, you mention that you are going to go to a family wedding in 2 months' time, and whether or not your ex-dumper would like to go with you. And all of a sudden, they start to go cold. Now, why is this? Is it because they're feeling kind of awkward about seeing your friends and family again after they know that they will all know that they dumped you? Is it some type of legitimate awkwardness, but they just need to kind of get through? Or is it them refusing to make future plans? Again, you need to use your common sense. You need to look at the individual situation. But if your ex-dumper is refusing to make any plans far out into the future, there is a possibility that they see you as a backup option until they find somebody quote-unquote better. They're happy to see you in the moment. They're happy to see you next week. But they're not happy to agree to go to a gig with you in 3 months' time. They're not happy to go to an event, a place, a location, a trip, a holiday, a vacation, whatever it may be. They're not happy to look ahead months into the future, even though maybe you've now met up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, but it's always been in the moment. It'll be like, oh, okay, are you free to get together? Yeah, let's get together. Are you free of a weekend? Yeah, let's get together. That's fine, but as soon as you start speaking about the future, 3, 4 months down the line, they are not wanting to make plans. Now, again, please use your common sense. If you just communicated for the first time in a year and you arrange to meet and the meet goes well and you say, hey, will you come with me to this wedding in 4 months' time? They might be a little bit cautious. Okay, so please use your common sense. But if you have met multiple times, it feels like it's going well in every other aspect, and you ask your ex if they want to go to a gig with you to see your favourite band that you both love, and it's in 3 or 4 months' time, and they're like, oh, I don't know whether I should buy this ticket yet. What does that tell you? Please use that common sense. I don't want you flying off the handle. I don't want you getting into an argument. I don't want you saying this, that, and the other to them when it's not necessary or appropriate. In fact, in reality, you should never be doing that anyway. Try to keep as much self-respect as you can. Don't give away your power by being somebody who's having an unstable mindset, by accusing them of things they haven't even done, or behaving in a way which is overly needy. But just bear in mind, why isn't your ex-dumper agreeing to future plans? There must be a reason. Is it because they don't have the money to pay for these tickets? Is it because they're cautious and they want to take things slow? To a degree, that could be a fair enough thing for them to say. But if you're feeling a great vibe, if you've met multiple times, if everything else seems to be going well, why won't they make future plans? You've got to really consider, Is it because they see you as here and now, but not their forever future? Are they planning to move away? If they are, you've got to consider, do you even want to get back together in this interim? Is this just going to break your heart once more? You've got to consider what is going on. Keep your eyes open and look out for signs that you're their backup option. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.